Diabetes, uncontrolled, is the number one cause of blindness in adults, of kidney failure in adults, of limb amputation, second to trauma. It leads the categories, and this is in people that are treated but are not treated well.
Cue music. Places, everybody places. We're starting in 3, 2.
It's time for Life Interrupted Radio, a show dedicated to practical skills for your mind, body, and soul. We're hoping we'll go in one ear and stay there. Here's the host of the show, Sharon Saylor.
Welcome to the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio, where we look at the rise of autoimmune disorders. The NIH estimates nearly 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder. To put that in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. You'll be as surprised as I was to find out what autoimmune entails. I brought together top experts that range from doctors, specialists, nutritionists, researchers, and even those recovering from autoimmune to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information about autoimmunity and how to live your life uninterrupted. So let's get started. Welcome to the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio. I'm your host, Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com. And oh my goodness, it's my pleasure to be with you here another Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You know, I was thinking, so usually I say I've got something fun planned for the weekend. I don't. So I'm not sure. I'm actually sort of looking forward to it, just having some me time, some downtime. So I'll let you know how that goes. I have some things planned, like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to do that, but I'm not sure if it's fun or not. Just some things to check off my list, which can always be nice to check things off your list, right? And I've got some chai tea. You could tell if you're on the video, you could tell I've really been slurping it, but I've got some chai tea with the homemade almond milk here for me. You're going to hear I'm a little nasally tonight, or it's been a couple of days, so I apologize for the quality of my voice in advance, but I'm sure we'll make it through. Maybe it's just spring allergies or something. Not sure. But tonight I've got a fascinating guest on a topic we haven't talked about yet, but I find it really important, as I think it's very, very related to the topic of autoimmune. And tonight we have Dr. Mona Morstein. And she is the author of Master Your Diabetes, a comprehensive integrative approach to both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And she is the executive director of the Low Carb Diabetes Association. And diabetes is a worldwide epidemic affecting an estimated 422 million people. That's as shocking as the numbers as autoimmune conditions are. In the U.S. alone, nearly a third of all Americans are either diabetic or pre-diabetic, which is just unbelievable to me. But we'll get the distinction between those. And I'll give you more of her bio as we go on, because I really want to dive into this topic. Thank you, Dr. Mona, for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm curious. What got you into the study of diabetes? Do you have a personal history with it, or how did you get into just understanding diabetes?
Well, no, actually, I don't really have a family history of it, it comes from not a very shining moment in my early medical history where I missed the diagnosis of really, I think, the very first person with uncontrolled diabetes to come into my practice. And that was a major shakeup for my confidence and also for my thought, if I was am I a good doctor? Am I a safe and responsible person to treat other people's health? And so putting me into a kind of professional crisis, I decided that really what I had to do was to become a master of diabetes and make sure that I never missed another patient and that I was always going to be on top of this condition in all of the ways that it presented itself. And I actually worked with Dr. Richard Bernstein in his office, he wrote the book, Dr. Bernstein's Diabetes Solutions, was the first one to bring up a low-carb diet and innovative insulin dosing for patients with diabetes. And from working with him, I came back and then launched myself into slowly becoming an expert myself in this medical condition.
Awesome. I was thinking like-minded here. Oh, why the Autoimmune Hour, Sharon? Why are going on 4 years and 170 episodes? Well, because I got an autoimmune condition and I had to master it. I love that. Congratulations I love that about people say, you know what? Take a little speed bump and then master it. Awesome. Now, can you define diabetes and then we'll define pre-diabetic? Because this idea of 422 million people, I'm just like, that's shocking. So let's define what is diabetes. I know there's type 1, type 2.
There's actually several different forms of diabetes. If we were going to do a one sentence, just kind of easy definition, people with diabetes have lost the metabolic capacity to process carbohydrates. Type 1 diabetes has that happen because of an autoimmune disease that attacks the beta cells in the pancreas. And the pancreas is a kind of rolled up, thin, long organ that sits behind your stomach on the left side of your upper abdomen. And it has two functions. One is to produce your digestive enzymes, and we call that the exocrine part of it. And then the endocrine part is producing hormones. And one of those hormones is insulin. And with the autoimmune attack, it attacks those very cells, what we call the beta cells, in these islets of Langerhans. And those cells, therefore, can no longer appreciably produce insulin. Now, so you cannot process the carbohydrates that insulin goes to your body cells and says, hey, I'm going to send a signal, and that means that you go and grab glucose in from the bloodstream and take it in and use it as energy. And without that signal from the insulin, the cells don't do that. And so blood sugar levels of glucose go up. And when they reach a certain level on a lab page, we'll diagnose a person with diabetes. Then there's two different ways autoimmune diabetes can come out, but we can talk about those later. The second is type 2 diabetes. And this is when generally the main body type, not the only body type, but the main body type with people with type 2 diabetes is abdominal obesity, or even abdominal overweight, obesity, where their fat is, right there in the middle of their tummy. And that leads to several different physiological problems and imbalances that, even though the beta cells can produce insulin, the cells, when it lands in that receptor, the cells are like, la, 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 la. They're just not going to listen. And so they become insulin resistant. There is insulin, but they're not listening to it because they're already full of energy. They don't want to take in more glucose. They don't want to store more as energy. They've already been doing that. Look at this excess energy I have right here. And so that's a type 2 that's non-autoimmune, but it is the most common way that people develop diabetes.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I'm glad you mentioned that diabetes type 1 was autoimmune. I'd read that in some places, and then other places I read don't mention it at all. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was going to be my next question, that I've seen it classified both ways, and I was curious. Now, let's jump into, there's so many places we could go. Let's jump into the type 1 for first, the autoimmune type. What are the common ways that people are treated for it? And my next question after that is it curable?
So good questions. As of right now, no, it's not curable. Now, there's a lot of studies being done, particularly with stem cells, where they're trying to, I think one of the most innovative studies that I came across is this, because remember, we have two things going on with the autoimmune disease of type 1 diabetes. One is the cells have mostly been destroyed. So they're not all gone, but most of them are gone. So they cannot physiologically produce enough insulin. Now, if we use stem cells, why don't we just produce more beta cells? Well, the second problem is because the immune system can come and attack and destroy those. So for cure, one of the most interesting studies is they took some stem cells, made them into beta cells, and then encapsulated them in like a little protective pod so that they can secrete the insulin through the pod, but the white blood cells can't get through the pod to attack and destroy them. Wow. So this is where research is coming to try to cure it. Now, however, it can be very well controlled. And here's what we have to know about diabetes. Diabetes doesn't cause anything bad to people, except uncontrolled diabetes causes enormous amount of problems in people, right? So the idea is if you have diabetes, but your blood sugars are very well controlled, then the physiological damage that happens doesn't happen. And people can live their whole lives very healthy without the complications of diabetes. So right now with type 1, it's not that we don't cure anybody, but we can amazingly control people so that there is a lack of damage to the cells and people can live and do things and get pregnant and do what they want in life as if they didn't have diabetes, as long as they're controlling it. So that's what's exciting in that regard. I think you had a question before the cure question.
Treated was my question. This is so fascinating to me. So let's talk about how it's treated, but I'm just got millions of questions going here. Let's go.
If we catch a child, so type 1 diabetes comes out in two main times of life. One is pediatric, which is the main way. And pediatric is kids, of course, although it goes up to about 25 years old. And even though you're not a pediatric patient, after 18 years old, but anywhere from that, 1.5 years old or so to 25 is classic. But then we have what's called LADA, latent autoimmune diabetes of the adult, which is a slower onset type 1 diabetes that generally happens to people over 35 on average to 60 on average, although it can be at 30, it can be at 65, whatever. But generally that 35 to 60 is where we see people just living their lives and doing everything healthy like any other autoimmune disease, and then coming down, with type 1 diabetes. Now, in general, of course, type 1 diabetes has to invariably be treated with insulin. Sometimes with kids, if we catch them right away and put them on a very strict kind of low carb diet, we can initiate what's called a honeymoon period where they don't need insulin for a while. But generally everybody by puberty will be needing insulin, and in general, most people will need to be injecting that hormone that their own pancreas is unable to produce to maintain life.
Wow. Oh my gosh. We're a little ahead of schedule, but I'm going to call a commercial break right here, because when we get back, like you could tell, I'm mesmerized. I've got many, many more questions. So guys, let's take a quick commercial break here and we'll be right back.
Life Interrupted Radio will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Sharon, and of course you know me from here on the Autoimmune Hour, but maybe you didn't know I'm also an author, mostly nonfiction. But recently I delved into the world of children's fiction with the Pinky Chenille series. If you haven't had a chance to check out Pinky Chenille and the Rainbow Hunters, go over and check it out at pinkychenille.com. That's Pinky, P-I-N-K-Y, Chenille, CHENILLE.com. Thanks. See you there.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
I am Fidel Mshombo. I was born in a city called Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America, and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio. I'm Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com, and tonight we're here with Dr. Mona Morstein, and she is the author of the new book, Master Your Diabetes, a comprehensive integrative approach to both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And she was explaining right before we had to take that break about type 1 and how it's considered an autoimmune condition, which, not that I'm glad to hear, but I'm glad that's cleared up in my mind because I've been reading that people call it both ways. Yeah. And I was curious about that. But let's jump into type 2 also for just a second, because that one I understand can be better controlled with weight loss and strict adherence to diet and things like that. So I think some people might be going, well, I've got type 2 instead of the autoimmune one. Oh, by the way, can you have both? I mean, or
yes, no? Actually. So here's the deal. With type 1 diabetes, if you're going to conventional care and they're just having you eat anything, or you are just eating anything like a high carb diet, you may be injecting too much insulin a day to attempt to control your blood sugars. For example, I'm a non-diabetic patient of normal body status. And for people like me, we produce on average, say 30 to 40 units equivalent of insulin a day to deal with everything we eat and drink. And so people with diabetes ideally should not be injecting, especially type 1, more than 30 or 40 units a day. But if you're eating oatmeal for breakfast and French fries and burgers and cookies,
the standard American diet.
Yeah, exactly. And you're trying to use insulin to cover that, which it will never do well, you're going to gain weight. And there can be overweight type 1 diabetic patients or type 1 diabetic patients injecting 60, 80, 100, 200 units a day. And that's going to initiate insulin resistance on top of their type 1 diabetes. And then it's a big mess. Now, it can't, however, go the other way. When people have type 2 diabetes and it's been uncontrolled for years, it's causing damage to many cells in their body, and so does type 1. They cause damage to the same cells, but in the type 2 diabetic, it can cause damage to what innately is a healthy pancreas. It's producing plenty of insulin, it's just the rest of the body isn't listening to it. But as the blood sugars are high, it causes this oxidative damage, and it can damage the pancreatic beta cells to the extent that over years, now this type 2 diabetic patient, their uncontrolled diabetes has actually so damaged their pancreas that it doesn't produce insulin anymore, and now they have to inject it. And this, though, is not a type 1, right, which is autoimmune. This is just type 2 with destroyed pancreas that now has to become insulin dependent as well.
So what I'm hearing is either way, adhere to doctor's advice very strictly, because it sounds like it can be a pretty nasty outcome if you...
Well, adhere to an integrative or naturopathic doctor's advice. I'm not sure, conventional care of diabetes is not good, which is why diabetes uncontrolled is the number one cause of blindness in adults, of kidney failure in adults, of limb amputation, second to trauma. And it leads the categories, and this is in people that are treated, but are not treated well, and their blood sugars are not controlled well. And so it's a pretty frightening thing to think about, but that's, it never has to happen to people with diabetes. It never has to happen to be that way.
Well, I think that way about a lot of autoimmune, my own autoimmune healing experience, as well as everything I hear from the people, my community here on the Autoimmune Hour. We all have to be strong self-advocates for and use our own common sense for our care. I certainly wouldn't be where I am right now off all of my autoimmune meds and absolutely thriving based on my initial diagnosis and the trajectory that I was anointed with. But you're right. Quality, understanding the whole person and our care is critically important. Couple of questions I want to pop up with is one question I've had is, what is pre-diabetic? Because we hear that term a lot too, which seems scarier to me because I guess that implies that I can really do something about it before I fall into the pit of diabetic.
That shouldn't be scary. That should be exciting and motivating. I
guess I don't even want to be near the pit.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Now, so prediabetes is based upon lab values a lot, right? Generally, when we wake up and we're fasting, we haven't eaten since supper, we wake up, on average, our blood sugar should be around 80 to 85. So in the 90s, we're raising our eyebrows, and prediabetes means you wake up and your blood sugar is between 100 and 125. And it means that your A1C, now the A1C is a main guiding monitor of how well your blood sugar is controlled. It gives us the average estimate of where your blood sugar range has been for the last 3 months. And a person without diabetes, healthy, should have an A1C between 4.8 to maybe 5.1. When you become a pre-diabetic, the range medical is from 5.7 to 6.4. Now, and then when you become a diabetic patient, your blood sugar fasting is 126 and above, and your A1C is 6.5 and above. So pre-diabetes is that 100 to 125, the A1C of 5.7 to 6.4. The problems with that is that we have many studies showing that damage to the body starts occurring when the A1C is above 5.5. And yet we don't even call a person pre-diabetic until they're at 5.7. So, people are already having damage to their body as a pre-diabetic before anybody, generally in conventional care, they start working on it, which is, we'll just wait and see. And when you reach diabetes, then we'll start treating you. And you're like, well, that doesn't really, that's why so many type 2 diabetic patients upon diagnosis already have some complications developing from the disease, because they may have been pre-diabetic for 5 years or 10 years. Damage has been happening during that time.
One of the things I found about my autoimmune when I was diagnosed almost 4 years ago, as I started studying autoimmune, I realized that I had autoimmune symptoms long before, but nobody ever treated me for the autoimmune before it became a full-blown diagnosis. It was like you said, a long ways down the road by the time I was finally diagnosed. What are some symptoms that I, as a human being, can look for and say, gosh, I got to start getting this under control now, or I go and get my blood tested? Because understanding the blood test is awesome, but I don't wake up every morning and know what my sugars are doing. So what are some things that I would look for going, maybe I should talk to someone about this?
With type 1 diabetes, there are other autoimmune conditions associated with type 1 diabetes, such as celiac disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and even Addison's disease, which is an autoimmune disease of the adrenal glands, causing a lack of production of the hormone cortisol, which can be life-threatening if it's not replaced. It's interesting. Type 1 as a child, and even as an adult, it tends to come on very suddenly. So they've been studying what are etiological risk factors that might increase the risk for developing type 1 diabetes, right? And so that's such things. So they look at gluten introduction or dairy. There's this big TEDdy trial where they're looking at many different things: environmental chemicals, vaccines, nutrient deficiencies. For example, the Finland has like the highest per capita rate of type 1 diabetes in kids. And so they've done studies where they gave 2 groups of newborns. They got some vitamin D and fish oils, and these didn't. And this group of newborns that got vitamin D and fish oils later on in life, as they tracked these groups, had much less onset of type 1 diabetes. So, of course, an infant generally doesn't show much symptoms of omega-3 deficiency, but, we're trying to just cover the bases of kids to reduce risk factors associated with it. They did one thing also. They had kids they've tested kids for antibodies for type 1 diabetes. And the kids that were positive, they didn't yet have clinical type 1 diabetes, but they already were still showing the immune system reacting and attacking parts of the pancreas. These kids already had leaky gut, intestinal permeability. And so we're also thinking that a virus or from the intestine can go through the leaky gut and cause autoimmune reaction against the pancreatic beta cells. So Coxsackie B virus and so we're looking at how healthy is the gut of the person. That's very important too. And just we can't wake up and just be looking at, we can test for if autoimmune disease is already happening before it clinically presents. But a lot of it is just trying to, not do antibiotics and make sure nutrients are good. And if the family history has autoimmunity in it, making sure the kids are on D and fish oils and fiber and don't get antibiotics and nobody spray, we don't have exterminators, spraying in our house and outside, and just doing everything we can. And yet, of course, still some kids, come down with type 1. We haven't yet uncovered all of the reason these genes kick in at any particular time. With type 2 diabetes, really, eat right, don't gain weight, exercise, manage your stress, and keep an eye on your blood sugars. Those we can look at labs and say, okay, that's, 2 years ago my fasting was 85, now it's 99. I got to do more exercise. I got to get rid of this junk food. And we can do that very well with type 2, but not so much with type 1.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's all the stuff I just didn't know. Wow. And it's myth-busting here. I had so many other ideas about what diabetes was. We need to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back, guys, and find out more about her 8 essential plans. So we'll be right back.
Life Interrupted Radio will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com to learn more.
Do you want to be a better leader, have better relationships, become more self-aware, be a better communicator? Hi, I'm Sharon Saylor, best-selling author, professional speaker, and executive coach. And my life passion is empowering professionals to be the best that they can be. After years of working with professionals, I've discovered the 7 things nobody is telling you that can cost you your clients, sales, and even your career. And I want to give it to you free. You've heard my show, you know my passion, and maybe we'll be working together sooner rather than later. So go grab this ebook now to find out the 7 things that's costing you big time over at SharonSaylor.com/radio gift.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
What are all the things you witness online in a day? Cats playing piano, selfies on your feed, your friend's picture being turned into a nasty meme that's been shared 50 times, 51, 52. When someone's being bullied online, it's hard to know what to do. Now you can speak up with the witness emoji. It looks like an eye in a speech bubble, and it's in the symbol section near the clocks in your phone. You'll let the world know it isn't cool, and you'll let your friend know you care. Learn more at eyewitnessbullying.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio. I'm your host, Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com, and tonight we're here with Dr. Mona Morstein, and she is the author of Master Your Diabetes, a comprehensive integrative approach to both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And she's been explaining to us about type 1 and that it's an autoimmune condition, and type 2, which is more about a lifestyle condition. And I appreciate the differences and knowing the differences. That is awesome. In your book, you have this fabulous 8 essentials plan. Can you walk us through that? Because I found that so helpful. So let's walk everyone through that.
Sure. The 8 essentials are a large grouping of categories that really needs to be analyzed and uncovered with each patient to see which ones are the weakest or even strongest aspects that we think might be harming their health and aggravating their diabetes. And so the 8 essentials, categories on which we're basically looking for treatment. The first is a low carb, whole foods diet. We're going to be analyzing the diets of all patients, see where they're at, and how do we gently educate them to eat this low-carb whole foods diet. Then is exercise. And exercise, there's many different categories of exercise that will work with patients. Then there's sleep, good sleep. Not getting good sleep will aggravate every autoimmune condition, and certainly it will aggravate the ability to control your appetite and eat well as a person with diabetes. First of all, if you get less than 5 hours of sleep a night, your risk for developing obesity increases 235%. Not 5%, 235%.
That again, 5 hours, less than 5 hours.
If you get less than 5 hours of sleep a night, your rate of obesity risk elevates 235%. So it's almost guaranteed you're going to be gaining weight. And this is because lack of sleep screws around with hormones. So it screws up our ability to control our appetite, and it makes us want to eat a lot more carbohydrates. So we have to work on sleep with all, we have to check in with all patients. What is their sleep like? How are they doing? Do they have good sleep hygiene? And we also then do stress. Right? So stress management, what are the stresses in a person's life? And oftentimes, as you probably realize, Sharon, the disease itself can cause stress on people. So it's not just stress affects the disease, but having the disease and monitoring it can be stressful. So we have to look at it from both sides to make a patient feel comfortable with themselves, with the condition they have, and also comfortable that the way that they're managing other stresses is amenable to making them feel happy and balanced, and therefore decreasing the effect on their diabetes. We then have healing the gut and the microbiome. So many aspects of autoimmunity and even insulin resistance relates to what's going on in the gastrointestinal tract. And all of us have had antibiotics, and people don't eat right or drink right, and even other medications. For example, NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, such as ibuprofen, naproxen, devastatingly damaging to the to the whole gastrointestinal tract. It can cause leaky gut and inflammation within an hour of taking it. So these are very, very harmful for people with any autoimmune disease or any body just in general, because they're so harmful to the gut. So so if a person has type 1 diabetes and we don't want them to get Hashimoto's, we don't want other autoimmune diseases, but they also have joint pain, or we have to work on that joint pain so they're not taking an ibuprofen every day, because that's going to work against what we're trying to curtail and heal. Right. The other is environmental toxins. So this is such a big input on autoimmunity and on so many hormonal, neurological, allergic, just health problems. Then we have supplementation, and supplementation can be used for so many different reasons with people with diabetes, such as appetite control, glucose regulation, insulin regulation, antioxidant protection, which is huge. Make sure they have enough nutrients in them. It can help elevate their mood, prevent depression, help prevent anxiety, help protect against cardiovascular disease, and so forth. So valuable for them to be on a logical, scientifically based supplement regimen. And then the last essential is medication. Right? So whether, you need insulin or you're taking some oral hypoglycemic agents, are the 8 categories that we look at with people with diabetes.
That's amazing. So many of those relate to autoimmune in general.
So true.
I'm thinking, the gut.
Right.
I was going through that list, and I could just check off the majority of those for any autoimmune condition, whether it was diabetes or not. So let's talk a little bit. You talked a bit about the microbiome and gut health, and that to me is critical in all autoimmune. We're almost up against another commercial break here, but just in the next probably 3 minutes or so, and we'll hit it again on the side of the commercial. Talk a little bit about ways that we can support and enhance our gut health.
Absolutely. So obviously the first things that we look at with the gut, it's going to do perfectly fine depending on what we put in it. So obviously, I'm a naturopathic physician, and my patient gets, strep throat or bronchitis or sinus infections. I don't need to use antibiotics. There are natural ways that we can treat a huge amount of acute illnesses. And so obviously trying to not ingest antibiotics except when really life-threatening or when you have to, really, is very important. But too much, junk food, fast food, genetically modified organisms, and there's 8 foods that contain those, and we don't want to get those, GMOs in our body. Too much, but then too much alcohol, too much caffeine, many other medications can cause problems, like proton pump inhibitors, right, are devastatingly damaging to the gut microbiome. Very common antacids that people stay on for years, which is completely not what they were designed to be used for. So we're trying to really work on the gut by just keeping it healthy innately by what we're putting in, or avoiding the things that really can damage it the most. With my low carb diet for patients with diabetes, and many people in many autoimmune diseases are doing a grain avoidance diet, which might be helpful for blood sugar regulation, but is very unhealthful for the microbiome, because there's a certain aspect of whole grain fiber, which is exactly what the gut needs. So the beneficial bacteria in our gut take that fiber and turn it into short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids are the food of the colon cells to keep them strong and healthy. And so when we just remove grains, it's very important to me. I will always add fiber powder into my patients, because we might say, oh, you can take some probiotic. And probiotic is great, but it might be just 8 species. like 4 lactobacillus and 4 bifido. That's great, but there's 500 to 1,000, different species. And what about the others? So if we're giving fiber powder, we're doing a broad-based food for many, many different bacteria that are helpful to us in our gut. So you can certainly take a probiotic for sure, or prebiotics, which are the food for the beneficial bacteria, but also giving fiber powder, I think, is very important. We have other things for leaky gut, which I mentioned. Do you want to take a break? Should we?
Yeah, we'll take a quick break and we'll come back and talk about other things for the leaky gut, because I think that is very important for all the autoimmune. So we'll be right back.
Life Interrupted Radio will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com to learn more.
Hi, this is Sharon, and of course you know me from here on the Autoimmune Hour, but maybe you didn't know I'm also an author, mostly nonfiction. But recently I delved into the world of children's fiction with the Pinky Chenille series. If you haven't had a chance to check out Pinky Chenille and the Rainbow Hunters, go over and check it out at pinkychenille.com. That's Pinky, P-I-N-K-Y, Chenille, CHENILLE.com. Thanks. See you there.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Change and growth are part of natural life and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Hey, Dr. Phil here. You know, I help people solve difficult problems every day, but one problem has me stumped: childhood hunger. Nearly 16 million children in America struggle with it. Luckily, the Feeding America network of local food banks collects surplus food, giving hope to hungry children and their families. But they need your help. Join me in supporting Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio. I'm your host, Sharon Saylor from SharonSaylor.com. And tonight we're here with Dr. Mona Morstein, and she is the author of Master Your Diabetes, a comprehensive integrative approach to both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And as you've been hearing about diabetes and how type 1 is related to autoimmune, and I'm just amazed as we're talking through this, many of the things that you're sharing tonight, Dr. Mona, are absolutely related to most of the autoimmune conditions. I'm not an expert on all of them, but everything I've heard tonight goes, wow, check that off. You could use that for any diagnosis that you have. And I think gut health is absolutely critical. So we've got the idea of prebiotic, probiotic, and fiber powders. Now, if our gut, let's say we have an autoimmune condition, so our gut is already most likely got some issues, some damage going on. These 3 items will help turn the gut around?
Well, I would say, I forgot, there is, sometimes we do with patients a stool analysis The stool analysis will tell us specifically what the microbiome looks, the beneficial bacteria, if there's an overgrowth of problematic bacteria or even pathogens. There's a lot of bacteria in the colon that relate to systemic autoimmunity. We call that molecular mimicry. For example, like ankylosing spondylitis, for example. There's a gut in the colon called Klebsiella. And Klebsiella is very tied to patients that have ankylosing spondylitis. And however coincidental it may be, every ankylosing spondylitis patient I treat has had an overgrowth of Klebsiella in their colon. And so we need to really eradicate that, because if the white blood cells are trying to attack Klebsiella, well, it has a protein on it that's very similar to a protein on the vertebral column. And can be then, if the white blood cells get confused, then they're thinking, they're going to attack that vertebral column. Proteus is associated as a bacteria with rheumatoid arthritis. And so we need to make sure, are we have anything out of whack that could be confusing our white blood cells and having them do a systemic attack, causing autoimmunity in some other area of the body, the thyroid, the synovial tissue, and so forth. So yes, so we need to, and that's same with type 1 diabetes. It's nice just to make sure there isn't any pathogen there that could be maybe increasing the autoimmunity for the diabetes, but also potentially causing them to have a second autoimmune condition develop, which is not uncommon with diabetes, but we don't really want to have happen.
Right. Well, I've heard that it's not uncommon that people get one diagnosis, often get multiple diagnoses for autoimmune, whether it's diabetes and something else or a different diagnosis.
I think a lot of that comes from the gut. I do believe, among other things. But I mean, there could be emotional, there could be many reasons, but the gut is so key for the whole rest of the health. Before the break, because I guess I'm loquacious, we were talking about healing up the leaky gut. So leaky gut can come because of inflammation in the lining of the gut. And so I'll use fish oils, and then we use things like glutamine, which is the food for the small intestine cells. And so there's much scientific data showing that it can significantly, in fact, totally heal up leaky gut, even within a month or two. You only have to be on this for 17 years to have it work. It can work pretty quickly at the right doses. And then there's other things in the gut to help rebuild the mucus lining and soothe the gut and help heal it, such as I love slippery elm gruel or N-acetylglucosamine. These are common things, marshmallow. There are these, licorice. There are just some things, aloe vera, that are soothing and healing to the lining of the gut, working very well in tandem with the L-glutamine.
Fantastic. Now we're just down to the last 8 minutes or so, but I have one final question, and then I want to find out more about how to get your book and how people can work with you. So you've been talking about this low carb diet, and I think people get confused. It's like, so I just can't have my Twinkies, right? But let's talk a little bit. Let's explain, how do you describe a low carb diet?
So that's a good question, right? Low carb. So again, the idea being, if you have celiac disease and gluten causes damage, incredible damage to the lining of your gut, you can't eat gluten. If you have, say, type 1 diabetes and you no longer can really metabolize carbohydrates, then those have to be significantly reduced. You can't control your blood sugar well eating a high carbohydrate diet and just injecting insulin. And this is the conventional axiom, is eat what you want and cover it with insulin. And they're terribly uncontrolled. And you can't do that. It's not humanly possible, right? So we have to have a low carb diet. Now, low carb diet, I would say less than 45 grams a day is low carb. Dr. Bernstein says 30 grams a day. The low carb ketogenic people want less than 20 grams a day. But, less than 40 or so is going to work for patients, and around 30 is ideal. So this is the numbers of restrictive carbs that we're looking at in the diet. Of course, that does remove all grains and pretty much removes all beans, although every now and then I have a patient who can have a little hummus, probably because the garlic and the oil in it, but mostly we're avoiding all grains, and we're avoiding, the other big one is beans, peas, lentils are the two main foods that are removed. But like with anybody who does a nutritionally based practice like myself, we need to spend very little time on what you cannot eat and spend a great deal more time on what you can eat. And so the idea is, you can't have any grain in any way, whole grain, white grain, nothing. But you can make your pancakes and your breads and your muffins from almond flour and nut flour and pecan flour and coconut flour, and there's shirataki noodles, and you can use coconut, and I have a bunch of recipes and websites, and so people are getting more motivated and excited about all these new foods that they can eat, instead of feeling depressed and despairing about taking out all the foods that they've been used to eating and so far have enjoyed, right? So, you've really got to focus, spend a little time saying, okay, you can't eat grains. Here's what you can eat. And, and so forth. So there are some other, you can't have potatoes. You can't have sweet potatoes, a couple of other things to throw in, or you can't have milk, but you can have unsweetened, alternative milks. And so, it's a long, I have about an 8-page handout I go over with patients on, how to eat, what will work for them as a person with diabetes. And a lot of it is what you can eat, as well.
I like what you can eat, because it is feeling like, oh my gosh, just another hurdle, I can't do that, I can't do this. We're almost out of time. I want everyone to know your website and how to get a hold of you and information on your book. Yeah. We'll have to have you back to talk about how to eat. We'll do that in the next one. And if you're on the video, she's showing a picture of her book here. It's called Master Your Diabetes, a comprehensive integrative approach to both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And share with us your website and where the book is available and how people can work with you.
My website is drmorstein.com, MORSTEIN.com. And my book is available on all the standard websites that people use to buy books. On one of them, it's the #1 best-selling book on diabetes right now. So
awesome! Congratulations! Very exciting.
So it's pretty easy to buy from any of the typical websites that you use to purchase things online.
Great, and that's called Master Your Diabetes: A Comprehensive Integrative Approach to Both Type 1 and Type 2 Diabetes. And as you've heard tonight, with my excitement about the book, as that so much of it is just about autoimmune. I mean, it's just about good health. And that's what I appreciated about the book. So even if you're like, well, Sharon, I'm a little worried I might be pre-diabetic or whatever, get the book, because so much of it is about quality health. And that's what I appreciated about it. There were so many things I could integrate, even though I don't have diabetes. So I appreciated reading her book for just that reason. Another great tool for me to read about ways to keep my health strong so I don't end up with diabetes.
Yeah, right. Good.
Everyone, join us here next Friday night for another episode of the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio. And if you haven't had a chance, run over to lifeinterruptedradio.com and sign up for Transcribe Tribe. We have almost all the transcripts up there. As you know, we didn't start this 4 years ago, but we've started it recently, and I think we're just about caught up. If you don't find the one you're looking for, just drop us a note there on the Contact Us at the Life Interrupted Radio and let us know what you're looking for. Also, join us on Facebook, if you'd like, at Life Interrupted Radio there. We've got all sorts of Q&As and questions and things that we can talk to our community there. So join our community on Facebook as well. As always, have a great weekend, whatever your adventures. Enjoy.
The information provided on lifeinterruptedradio.com is for educational purposes only. What you hear, read, and see on Life Interrupted Radio is based on experience only. The information presented here should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on Life Interrupted Radio. You've been listening to Life Interrupted Radio. To learn more, listen to other shows, and gain free resources that can help empower your life, be sure to stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com. This episode is brought to you by mindfulnessinactionbook.com. To get your free 4-minute guided meditation to relax, refresh, and renew in just 4 minutes, and who doesn't have 4 minutes? Stop by mindfulnessinactionbook.com now. This guided meditation is in handy MP3 format, so you can use it anywhere, anytime. Download it now at mindfulnessinactionbook.com.
Do you want to be a better leader, have better relationships, become more self-aware, be a better communicator? Hi, I'm Sharon Saylor, best-selling author, professional speaker, and executive coach. And my life passion is empowering professionals to be the best that they can be. After years of working with professionals, I've discovered the 7 things nobody is telling you that can cost you your clients, sales, and even your career. And I want to give it to you free. You've heard my show, you know my passion, and maybe we'll be working together sooner rather than later. So go grab this ebook now to find out the 7 things that's costing you big time over at SharonSaylor.com/radio gift.